Hey, this is chapter 8 in your textbook. We're jumping around in case you haven't noticed. In the textbook, I have rearranged the chapters the way I think they should be. No one bothered to ask me. But this is historical influences on fire prevention. We mentioned this a little bit in chapter 1. Some of the historical fires and how they have helped to build fire codes. I was going to narrate the PowerPoint, and then I decided I would just let you kind of go through that. There's a lot of information in there about these individual fires. I just kind of want to hit the highlights of those things. We've always kind of been in the fire service a reactive organization, and I think that holds true when we look at things like our fire codes that do come from bad things that have happened. That's just as simple as I know how to put it. People don't think they're going to have a fire. People don't recognize a hazard as a hazard. They don't recognize a behavior as a hazardous behavior. They think they're invincible. And so bad things don't happen to them. So we're going to look at some of these significant fires and some of the things that have resulted that have improved conditions, maybe is the way to put it. One of the things that I've always thought, we recognize these really big fires where hundreds of people died. But I can tell you that last week, that during the month of December, hundreds of people have died as a result of fires. But they're like 1 and 2, at a time. I was trying to think where I read maybe Baltimore had 3 die at a time in a fire. So the numbers, it's that impact that we see where great numbers die in one fire, but we also know that people die every day as a result of fire. So we should not be immune to that fact, I guess. So the first one that we talk about is the Great London Fire. This happened in September of 1666, where homes were made of wood and thatch. The buckets had very little effect on there. There was, however, a minimal loss of life in this particular fire. And it was through this fire that we began to see some of the different construction features. Maybe wood and thatch is not such a great idea for building our homes. That we can have some less restrictive or less combustible materials. The Iroquois Theater Fire, this is kind of an interesting one. We don't hear a lot about this. This was in 1903, where about 2,000 people were in attendance. It was another one of those fireproof buildings, which I have yet to see. The contents were, of course, combustible, as they are with any building. An arc light ignited one of the stage drapes. They tried to calm the audience. There were 27 exits. Your book says they were locked or hidden by drapes. It seems like I read somewhere, and it may be in this in your text. I can't remember that. For that there was no exit from the backstage area. Like the dressing rooms and that kind of thing that were backstage and underneath. There was no exit from there. They had to come up front and go through the fire. And so claimed 600 lives. 250 people were injured. There were some indictments that came down, but no one was punished. This, of course, when you hear this, you think clearly marked exits. Doors open from the inside, not the outside, and more stringent safety standards in theaters. The Baltimore conflagration happened in 1904 in, of all places, Baltimore, Maryland. It started in the basement of a 6-story mercantile building, burned a lot of buildings. Every wholesale house in the city went down to the docks. There was a lot of appeals for assistance from other cities. People came, but their equipment could not be used together. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? Maybe national standard threads are a part of the game now. So, Triangle Shirtwaist Fire. This is a very well-known fire. This is a very tragic fire. They're all tragic, but this one's a little bit more. March of 1911 in New York City. This is a time when they made shirts. So there was a lot of cotton in this facility. The majority of the employees at the time were women, were teenage girls. They didn't speak English. They were immigrants. The fire, if I remember right, it was like the 7th, 8th, and 9th floors, or maybe the 8th, 9th, and 10th floors were the Triangle Shirtwaist factory itself. And the fire started in the 8th floor, a discarded match, and of course it spread very quickly. They tried to put it out. There was a rickety fire escape. They tried to go into a single elevator. I had heard that heard somewhere or saw in a movie that the elevator went to the 10th floor for management, and they got out. How about that? Many women were trapped on the 9th floor. They were forced to choose between the fire or jumping, and many of them chose to jump. There's some pretty famous pictures around about that particular. Looking to see what's in the book. There's some pretty dramatic pictures of the bodies laid out in after the fire. So the quote there's a quote that says, "I looked down to see my girls, my pretty ones, going down through the air. They hit the sidewalk, spread out and still." So, of course, 146 employees died. There was a lot of litigation about this particular fire. They had a no smoking policy, but it was commonplace, so obviously it was not enforced. And they pointed a lot of blame toward the building department. It's never my fault. So there was a lot of lessons learned from that. Another famous fire, Our Lady of Angels Catholic School in Chicago. This is in 1958. I thought it was in 56, but this says 58. I want to verify right here. 1958. I have a friend who lives outside Chicago, and she grew up there, and she's a little bit older. And she remembers her parents talking about this fire at the dinner table. And there's been a great book written about this particular fire. Of course, that there was exterior brick, everything inside was combustible. Everything was wood, and they had been coated and recoated with a flammable varnish. And that's what caused the fire to spread. There was one staircase at one end of this 2-story building that was the school. And the fire started in the basement at that staircase. And so it just went straight up. It acted like a chimney, as we know it will. There was, of course, no fire sprinklers. This is a story I heard, that the fire extinguishers were located 7 feet off the floor so that the children could not tamper with them. And of course, nobody could reach them either. And so hence, we can't mount our fire extinguishers any higher than 5 feet off the floor, because most people can reach that. The stories that I have heard or that I've read about this, that the fire was started by one of the children. He started it in the trash can at the base of the stairs, and that he told them that he did that. But when his dad got there, he took it back. He reneged on his story, on his confession. And so it remains an undetermined fire at this time. It was never proven. So I've heard that the Mother Superior was the only one that could pull the fire alarm, and somebody went and got her. She was in the main church building. The fire department responded to the main church building instead of to lots of different things you hear about that kind of thing. But I think about this fire. 96 people died, I believe, is what happened. Yes, 92 students of 95. 92 students and 3 nuns died as a result of this fire. And I think about my own experience in the fire service, and this would have done me in. This type of fire where there was that many fatalities of children, especially. It certainly would have done me in. So it seems like we get a little reprieve in time from those big fires. That was in 1958, and the next one that's mentioned is the MGM Grand Hotel fire. This occurred in 1980, and the fire started in a restaurant. It was an electrical problem. This was an area that did not have sprinklers. The hotel was sprinklered, but the casino floor and the main part of the casino was not, if I remember right. They were not required to have that. So this is where you hear stories of people that died attached to their slot machine because they wouldn't leave. They would not leave as a result of that. Many of the people that died in this fire, it was from smoke inhalation. They tried to exit. The smoke traveled through the hotel. Many of the occupants got trapped on the higher floors. They tried to escape, and they were not able to get back into their rooms. So again, there was a lot of flammable furnishings, PVC pipe, glue, plastic mirrors on the wall, that kind of thing in the casino. 85 people died as a result of this fire. And so there was a lot of lessons learned from that. I'm a little surprised that, and we'll talk about that in a minute, as we talk about the MGM Grand fire. We don't talk about the hotel fire here in Atlanta in 1948, which we'll talk about in a minute when I can remember the name of it. The Bhopal, India chemical disaster, I don't know a whole lot about that. I remember it. In 1984, it was released when gas was released when water leaked into one of the storage tanks. And there was a problem with the warning siren. There was a cloud that escaped. And there was a lot of panic that ensued from that. And this is, we see SARA Title III as a result of this, which is your hazardous materials reporting requirements and the like. The first interstate bank fire was in Los Angeles in 1988, and this is one of the most devastating high-rise fires, 62-story building. It began in an open plan office area, thought to be electrical. It extended to the floors above and to the outer walls of the building. There was only one fatality, only one too many. 35 occupants were injured, 14 fire personnel were injured, and it destroyed 4 floors. Sprinklers had been installed in 90% of the building, but the valves were closed, awaiting installation of water flow alarms. So a lot of lessons learned there. The One Meridian Plaza fire, this was in Philadelphia, and I've actually had the pleasure of hearing, now I'm really having a senior moment. The fire chief at the time, his first name's Phil. I'll get to his last name in a minute. It started on the 22nd floor of the bank, consumed 8 floors, burned for more than 19 hours. It reached the floor. It was only controlled when it was reached by, it reached the floors where there was automatic sprinklers. 3 Philadelphia firefighters died in this fire. $100 million in direct loss. And there was a lot of litigation, of course, that came out of that. Your book references Oakland Hills fire in 1991. That was a result of embers from a previous fire. Non-standard hydrant connections made it difficult for mutual aid departments to help with that fire. But it also taught a lot about wildland prevention, defensible space, non-combustible roofing materials, and the like. Your book talks about 9/11, and I don't know if we need to really talk about it a whole lot, as I would say most of you were around then. It's kind of hard to think that there's people that weren't, but there are. Of course, this was in September 11th of 2001 when aircraft were flown into the World Trade Centers. And I don't know that all the prevention in the world. Now, interesting, I've heard stories. There's a great story about one of the brokerage firms. They had a safety and security guy who insisted that they have fire drills all the time. They occupied several floors in one of the towers, and they had fire wardens for those floors. And I believe 100% of the people in that business made it out safely. This particular guy, their safety and security guy, went back in to help with others, and he lost his life there. So that piece of prevention came out of 9/11 as well, having drills in multi-story buildings. The Station nightclub fire, again, another one, 2003, pyrotechnics ignited flammable coverings. It had been grandfathered. The building had been grandfathered so that there was no sprinklers. One of the things, if you've seen the video from this, people wanted to leave the way they came in. And there was other exits that were free and clear, but everybody piled up at that front door, and it just could not hold that capacity. I've heard different stories about whether the building was over capacity. I heard that it wasn't overcrowded, and then I heard it was. I think it depends on who you ask. But it was a very fast-moving fire. 100 people died. Again, I have a friend who responded to that fire, and somebody asked him about it. He said, "I don't want to talk about it." I can only imagine. I can only imagine what that is like. And so, of course, this is one where the owner of the nightclub, the band, even the sponsors of the band, I heard, I think it was Budweiser, settled for like $1 million or something because they had been a sponsor. And they went to jail. I think the owner of the building, or the manager of the club, and the band manager, the owners of the nightclub and the band manager, received prison sentences. They've recently gotten out. They're out. They weren't for very long. So when we look at these fires, we can see this progression of things that I don't know. We look back now and say that was so easy to figure out. People don't want to think things will happen. This is not. This is a fireproof building. If I can never remember the name of the hotel in Atlanta, I'll remember it when I get through videoing. That was in 1948. It was another fireproof. It was a fireproof hotel. It was open in the center. It was at Christmas time, it actually spurred the creation of the Georgia State Fire Marshal's Office. So maybe you should look up the name of that. I'm so sorry. You're probably trying to tell me through the video what the name of it was. But all of these fires, we look back and they're so sad. And you can even look at the ones that have been since this time. Like I mentioned on the earlier video for chapter 1. And we're going to take a chance. We're going to take an opportunity to explore some of the more recent fires, like the Ghost Ship in California, the high-rise in Hawaii, the high-rise in Dubai, and see how comprehensive prevention programs could help with that. So this particular chapter mentions the text America Burning. We delve into that a little more in another course, but I would encourage you to look at that. That is, to me, the Bible of fire prevention. And I don't mean anything disrespectful about that. Certainly, it has a lot of history and valuable information for us. So as you go through and go through the PowerPoint, read some of the specifics about these fires. Like I say, I'll probably remember the name of the hotel fire in Atlanta when I turn off the video. If you have any questions or anything, let me know. Read through these. You've got an assignment, a writing assignment for this particular chapter, and I look forward to reading your responses. Thanks so much. Have a great day.